Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about the violence in the schools throughout the years. And I'm going to be mainly focusing this on the United States of America's education system, not focusing on other countries and their education systems, as they are very different than America's. And side note, I also know that we are not supposed to, or like it wasn't recommended to use a recording, but I thought it would be a much better way for me to talk you through some of these slides to make more connections and meanings. I think you would just get a better grip if I talk through these slides instead of just handing you them. Okay, so I decided to do a little experiment and I want to ask you this question. I asked this question to 10 random people and now I'm going to ask you. When you think of school violence, what is the first thing that comes to your head? First thing, just boom, right there. Well, out of the 10 people, 7 out of 10 said school shootings. The other 3 said bullying. Now, that's a thing that a lot of Americans will say, that school shootings is the school violence that is happening. And while it is happening, unfortunately, at a rising rate, that is not the thing that started school violence. So today we're going to be talking about where school violence started to become known. So we're going to go actually way back into the 1950s where we talk about nuclear threats. So this was around the time of the Cold War. And a lot of Americans were worried about these nuclear threats that might happen. However, not many of them were as worried because these nuclear threats weren't becoming a reality. And that was until 1949 when Kazakhstan created and successfully detonated their first nuclear weapon. Now, this has terrified America because now there's a real threat out there. Kazakhstan has shown that they have successfully made a nuclear weapon, and now America is scared for themselves, and especially the families. And this is because, what if my child went to school when this happened? What will the school do to help save my child in case I am not there when a nuclear attack happens? So, by the early 1950s, schools across the United States were practicing the duck and cover protocol, and this was a product of the Cold War. And the duck and cover protocol was when the students would dive under their desks when instructed by teachers and cover their heads with their hands. And to help the students make this more normalized and not scare them so much, the United States made an animation turtle named Bert the Turtle. And Bert the Turtle helped kind of explain the duck and cover protocol to the students so it would help them better remember and feel more comfortable talking about it. Because even though it is a scary thing, if it does happen, you want your students to be focused and prepared on what they need to do. So, in 1957, lawmakers passed the National Defense Education Act. And this act basically stated that it was how important it was to have these protocols mandated in the schools and have safety protocols like the duck and cover protocol placed in schools to help keep the students safe. And this law showed the importance American schools had in the Cold War and how much impact their doing on this protocol, the duck and cover protocol, had on the United States. So here is a picture of Bert the Turtle, like I stated earlier. So here it says, "Oh my, danger." You see there's something flying right there. Bert ducks and covers. He's smart, but he has his shelter on his back. You must learn to find shelter. So this is very blunt, but it also has fun animations. So this is, like I said, a way to help normalize this to the students and help them feel more comfortable doing it and more confident in themselves if this were to happen. So now we're going to skip ahead to the 1970s to corporal punishment. Now I know nuclear threats and corporal punishment is a big difference. However, it is still violence in the school, so I decided to keep it in. So basically, the definition of corporal punishment is the use of physical force with the intention of causing a child to experience pain so as to correct their misbehavior. And this happened so far forward that in 1977, the Supreme Court ruled in Ingram v. Wright, stating that corporal punishment in public schools was constitutional, which means that each state could make its own rules when physically disciplining their students. So some people back in the 70s in South Dakota may have experienced it different than people in Minnesota. It all depends on how the state took it. And what the schools used normally was a large wooden paddle, and they would have the students lean over and they would spank them, basically, on the buttocks. And some school districts specified the discipline used, such as like the length of the paddle needs to be this wide, obviously no cracks, there can't be any holes or anything sharp, things like that, very specific. And the range of corporal punishment was all these different things. You could have been late to class, talking back to a teacher, disrespecting other students, and running in the hallways. Each one of those you could have been sent to the principals or teachers where you would have gotten paddled. Okay, here's an interview. I talked to someone who lived in the school system during the 70s. And he stated, when we were called into the principal's office, we were told to bend over, grab our ankles, and we were paddled in the buttocks. Our principal was known for doing this, so whenever we were called in his office, you knew what was coming. And here is a picture of what was typically used in the school system. This person I interviewed talked about how this was hung above his wall for the principal. So it was very well known. He was almost proud of having this paddle. It wasn't something hidden or secret. It was something out there for everyone to see and to threaten, basically. Like, if you don't do this, you will get paddled. Now we're going to jump ahead again to a couple decades to the Columbine High School shooting. Now, for those of you who don't know, the tragedy of the Columbine school shooting took place on April 20th, 1999, where two boys, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, who were seniors at the Columbine High School, used handmade bombs and guns to kill as many people as they would in this school. In the end, the whole shooting was about an hour, and in the end, 13 people were murdered, 12 students and one teacher, as well as both the shooters after they fatefully shot themselves in the head, killing themselves. At the time of the Columbine shooting, it was the 5th worst mass shooting in the history of the United States. Now, in 2020, it's not even in the top 10. So here's an actual picture from the surveillance camera. There is Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris right there in the cafeteria. So because of Columbine, before Columbine, school shootings were not a thing. They were not known whatsoever. So after Columbine happened, what did schools do to help prevent this from happening? Well, they had metal detectors, kind of like at airports where you have to walk through a metal detector. And if you had something metal, it would ring and you would have to put it through something or show it to the guards. Another thing is hardwire buttons, school resource officers, and safety locks. So here's a picture of the metal detectors I was talking about. See, there's school, but before you go into the school, you have to go through these metal detectors, and if something beeps, you put it through here. The next is hardwire buttons. You see it's under someone's desk, and these buttons are designed to immediately call 911 if a threat or an active shooter were to come in. And see, in case you can't get to your phone in time. School resource officers, they are wandering the halls and ready there when you need it. And last but not least, safety locks. Now, you might have seen this, or this might seem familiar to you, and that's because I took this picture in the history classroom in the Madsen. This is designed to keep out a threat, not keep you in, keep out a threat. And it's mostly designed for school shooters. There could be other threats, but it's mostly designed for school shooters. And the goal is this red thing right here, you put it over these two bars and it is unable to open the door. The shooter's unable to open the door. Now, what a lot of schools do as well, besides some may have this or some may have just locks on their doors from the inside, a lot of schools have to practice if there's an active shooter. The whole school has to practice this, and each classroom has their own way of where to go, what to do. And like we may have practice. For example, I practiced this when I was in high school, and you might have as well. And this was becoming the normal in the United States. Now, from Columbine to now, let's look at the statistics. So since Columbine, there have been 231 school shootings since Columbine High School, and that is not including misfires and stopped attempts. 304 people have died of the result of school shootings, and 10 elementary schools have been victims of school shootings. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the Sandy Hook Promise. So what the Sandy Hook Promise is, it's basically a nonprofit organization built on from parents from a school shooting who lost their children. So this shooting was at Sandy Hook Elementary in Connecticut in 2015 on December 14th, where over 20 children were murdered. And they were between, I believe it was kindergarten, first grade, second grade maybe, and some teachers. So these parents came together and they created this nonprofit organization, and their goal is to bring awareness to gun violence. So unfortunately, I am unable to click on these right now, but I will leave the link outside. I tried to do it earlier and it won't let me screen record and let you watch at the same time. So I will let you watch that on your own, but I really recommend you watching them. They're like 2-minute each commercials that were aired on TV, so you might have seen these before. And it's bringing awareness to gun violence in schools. So it's a very interesting 2 commercials. So in conclusion, violence in the schools has been around for decades, long before Columbine even was considered. But thanks to new technologies, stuff is being made all the time to help keep our kids and children safe. But the question is, will school shootings continue to be the threat to schools? Or will a new issue arise? For example, in the 1950s, everyone was all over nuclear threats. Then it moved to something new. Then it moved to something new. So the question is, will it change to something new again? Will the deaths in school shootings continue to rise? Will the threats continue to rise? Or will some new violence arise and school shootings start to lower and this new violence starts up? Okay, I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Here's all my references. And yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them when you reply to my post. And I will also link with this the 2 YouTube commercials.